It was just past noon on a quiet Tuesday in Georgia when Troy Sanders stepped out of his small law office, coffee in hand, eyes tired from yet another morning of paperwork. He never saw the boy coming, not until a soft voice called out, "Sir." Troy turned and saw him, a scruffy little boy, no older than 6. Mud stained his shoes. His shirt was 2 sizes too big, and his face held that haunting mix of exhaustion and determination only life's crueler hands could craft. "Is this where the lawyers work?" the boy asked, pointing at the firms. Troy blinked, caught off guard. "Yeah, I'm one of them. Can I help you?" The boy looked down and hesitated. Then with both hands he offered something wrapped in a faded napkin. It was a banana, bruised but fresh. "This is all I have," the boy whispered. "Can you help my mom? She's in jail. I picked this from a farm on the way here." Troy froze, the banana still extended toward him. It wasn't the banana that stunned him. It was the boy's eyes. There was something oddly familiar in them, something that pulled at a part of him he didn't know was still alive. "What's your name?" Troy asked softly, crouching to meet the boy at eye level. "Priam," he said. "I'm 6. Troy's brow furrowed. Priam, an old name, like something from ancient times. His mind wandered for a second to the name Priam, the last king of Troy and the Trojan War. Strange how the name echoed in his chest. "Where are you from, Priam?" he asked gently. "From the next town. I walked." "You walked here? Alone?" Priam nodded. "I asked people for directions. I had to come. I miss my mom." Troy's chest tightened. The next town was over 6 miles away. For a boy this small to make it alone. It wasn't just brave, it was desperate. "What happened to your mom?" "They said she stole jewelry. But she didn't. She always tells me stealing is bad. She wouldn't do it." "She's not bad, sir." Troy looked at the boy again, this time with a heaviness in his heart. This wasn't just a legal case. This was something more, something he couldn't explain. "Have you eaten anything?" Priam shook his head. Troy sighed. "Come with me. We'll get food. And you can tell me everything about your mom." As they walked toward a nearby diner, Troy couldn't shake the feeling inside him. A strange warmth and something else. A flicker of familiarity, like he'd met this boy before. But that was impossible, wasn't it? 7 years ago Troy had been in an accident, hit by a truck while crossing a Seattle street. When he woke from the coma, he'd lost the last 3 years of his life. Doctors called it selective amnesia. He called it a curse. Since then, he'd lived with a hollow space in his memory and in his chest. Now, something about this boy, his name, his eyes, his bravery, stirred those hollow places. Something was beginning to wake up, and Troy had no idea how deep it would go. The sun was barely rising when Troy's car pulled up outside a modest, weather-worn house on the edge of town. Priam sat beside him in the passenger seat, cradling a small brown paper bag filled with leftovers from dinner the night before. Troy had insisted on packing it for him. The boy hadn't argued. As the engine died, Pry unbuckled quickly and scrambled out. "She's not home," he said. "Auntie Gigi is watching me." Before Troy could step out, a sharp voice rang out from the porch. "Priam Fletcher, where have you been?" Troy looked up and saw a woman, tough with worry written all over her face, marching toward them with her arms crossed. She wasn't angry. Not really. She was afraid. "I told you not to go anywhere without telling me first," she said, kneeling to grip Pry's shoulders. "Do you know how scared I was? What if something happened to you?" Pry's shoulders slumped. "I went to find a lawyer. For Mom." Gigi turned to Troy then, still tense. "You're the lawyer?" "Attorney Troy Sanders," he said, extending a hand. She eyed it for a beat, then shook it, brief, firm. "I've been taking care of Pry while his mom's inside," she said. "But you have to understand, this kid vanished yesterday morning. I got home around 3 and he was gone." "I brought him home last night," Troy said. "He walked all the way to town on his own." Gigi gasped and looked at the boy, who stared at the ground. Her anger melted into disbelief. "He walked all the way? 10 kilometers at least," Troy said. "That's not something you forget." Gigi's expression softened. "You're lucky nothing happened to you," she murmured, brushing dirt off the boy's cheek. "I just missed Mom," he whispered. Troy stepped in gently. "I promised him I'd help." That starts with hearing her side of the story. They drove in silence to the local police station. Pry sat in the back seat between them, his small fingers tightly clutching the bag of bananas. He hadn't let them go since the first meeting. When they arrived, Gigi signed the visitor's form, while Troy asked to speak with Aylin Fletcher, currently detained for qualified theft. The desk officer nodded and led them down a narrow hallway. The scent of metal and bleach hung in the air. Everything was cold and fluorescent and far from forgiving. Then the door opened, and there she was. Aylin Fletcher stepped into the visiting room with a quiet dignity that made the space feel smaller. Her eyes scanned the room and froze on Pry. "Pry," she breathed. "Mom!" he cried out, running forward. The boy launched himself into her arms, and she knelt to hold him tightly, eyes glistening. "I told you to stay with Auntie Gigi," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I missed you," Pry whispered back. "But he's gonna help. He's a lawyer. He brought me home." Aylin's gaze slowly shifted past her son and locked onto Troy. And for the briefest second, something flickered across her face. Shock, pain, recognition. She blinked. "You're the attorney?" she asked, composing herself quickly. "I am," Troy replied, but his voice was softer than it should have. Aylin held his gaze for a moment longer, then turned to set Pry gently on the bench beside her. "Thank you for looking after my son," Troy nodded. "It was no trouble." "Do you know me?" he asked suddenly. Her brows rose, startled. "No," she replied almost too quickly. "You just look familiar." "I'm sorry." He tilted his head slightly. That hesitation, that flicker in her eyes. He wasn't sure what it was, but something about this woman pulled at his gut like a thread left hanging too long. "I need to hear your side," Troy said, gently taking a seat across from her. "Everything. From the beginning." Aylin sat down, composed, but Troy noticed she kept her hands clenched in her lap. "I've worked at Crystal Gold Jewelers for nearly 5 years, she began. "I was promoted to supervisor a year ago. My job was everything to me because I had nothing else. Just Pry. I didn't even take weekends off if I could help it." She paused, looking down. "Then, a week ago, our boss's mistress came. Her name is Mary Quinto. She visits often, sometimes stays longer than she should. That day, she was the only customer in the shop. A few high-end pieces went missing. I didn't even know until the inventory audit." "Was there any proof?" "It was her?" Troy asked. Aylin nodded. "The security footage originally showed her browsing near the display case, but by the time the police reviewed it, that part was missing. Gone. I believe Mr. Lim had it erased. He's protecting her. And now, here I am." She finally looked up, and her eyes met his, not with pleading, but with quiet heartbreak. "Do you believe me?" she asked. "I do," Troy said without hesitation. She seemed surprised. "I can't explain it," he added. "But I believe you." Just then, Pry tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Tell him, Mom. Tell him about the time you gave away your own jacket." Aylin blinked. "Pry?" "No, Mom. He should know. It was raining and that old man had no jacket. You came home cold and wet and I asked why. You said, because sometimes people need things more than we do." Aylin smiled faintly, but her eyes shimmered. Troy felt something twist in his chest. Whatever this woman had been accused of, he didn't buy it. Not for a second. Qualified. "Theft is bailable," he said after a moment. "I'll post bail. You'll be out of here soon." She blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Why are you doing this?" Troy hesitated. "Maybe I've been missing something in my life. Maybe this is the beginning of finding it again." She didn't answer, but she looked away, eyes suddenly distant, like she knew exactly what he meant, like she had once been part of what he'd lost. The name echoed through his mind like a ripple across still water. Aylin Fletcher. Troy Sanders had heard countless names in his career, names of clients, names of criminals, names on forms and depositions and appeals. But this one, this name, hit something different, like the ghost of a song half remembered, familiar, intimate, dangerous. He sat across from her in the dull gray of the police visitation room, and yet the walls seemed to close in, the air heavier now than when they first stepped in. He stared a moment too long, his lawyer instincts momentarily numbed. "You said your name is Aylin Fletcher?" he asked again, voice slightly hoarse. Aylin hesitated, just enough to betray that she'd noticed the way he said her name. Yes, she didn't elaborate. But Troy didn't miss the flicker in her eyes, the way she glanced down quickly and smoothed the crease in her shirt as if it would cover up the tremor in her voice. Her posture had shifted, more guarded now, as though a door had shut inside her the moment she spoke her name aloud. Troy blinked. The echo in his head remained. Aylin Fletcher. He should have remembered that name. But it didn't come with a flood of clarity or certainty. It was more like a bruise he didn't know he had until someone touched it. "I'm sorry," he said slowly. "I didn't mean to sound strange. It's just, your name sounds familiar." She raised her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "It's a common name." "Maybe," he said, but his gut told him otherwise. And then, silence. The room didn't offer any comfort. The buzz of the ceiling fan filled the space between them. Priam, having tired himself out from the emotion of seeing his mother, had now curled up on the bench, resting his head in Aunt Gigi's lap. Troy cleared his throat. "Listen, Aylin. I meant it earlier. I believe you. I don't understand why," she said carefully. "Because I look at that boy," Troy said, nodding toward the sleeping Priam, "and I see a child raised with love, discipline, empathy. You can't fake that. Especially not at his age." Her eyes softened a little. "He's all I have. And you've done a remarkable job," Troy added. There was a pause. And then, just barely above a whisper, she said, "He doesn't have a father." Troy didn't react outwardly, but inside, the echo of her name grew louder. "He said that," he replied gently, "that it's just been the two of you." She nodded, her hand resting protectively on the boy's small back. He hesitated again, then quietly, "You're sure we've never met?" Aylin looked directly at him. Her gaze was calm, but her fingers were trembling. "I'm sure." She was lying. He could feel it, like static in the air before lightning strikes. But why lie? Troy looked away for a moment. The ache in his head had started again. Subtle, like a memory knocking from the inside. He drew in a deep breath and changed. "The subject, the charge is qualified theft," he said. "It's bailable," she blinked. "You're going to post bail?" "Yes." "Troy, you don't even know me." "Maybe I did," he said quietly. "Maybe I still do." She looked startled. "I'm not here to judge you, Aylin," he added. "I'm here to help. And not because your son gave me bananas, because something about this just feels right." "You talk like you're chasing something," she said. "It wasn't a question. It was an observation." Troy looked at her and smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I lost 3 years of my life," he admitted. 7 years ago, I got hit by a truck. Woke up thinking I was 22. I wasn't. I was 25. Doctors said it was selective amnesia. Aylin froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "I've been trying to remember ever since," he continued. "Every night I dream of someone, a woman, I hear her voice. I tell her I love her, she says she loves me too. But I can never see her face." Now Aylin's eyes welled. She turned her head sharply and wiped away a tear before it could fall. "I thought maybe it was just a dream," Troy said. "But then your son showed up." Aylin swallowed hard. "It's just a coincidence." "Maybe." The officer stepped in then, announcing the end of visiting hours. Troy stood up. "I'll post your bail within the hour. You'll be home tonight." She looked at him, uncertain, vulnerable. "Thank you." He nodded. Then just before he walked out, he said, "By the way, if I ever did know you, if I ever hurt you, I'm sorry." Aylin couldn't speak. She simply stared after him, hand pressed to her chest like she was holding her heart in place. Outside, under the hot Georgia sun, Troy leaned against his car and exhaled deeply. Something was happening. Something big. And for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of finding out what. By the time Troy returned to his office that afternoon, something in him had shifted. He wasn't just trying to help a boy and his mother anymore. He was chasing a truth that refused to stay hidden. Troy's office was modest but well-equipped. His assistant Lorna looked up as he entered, eyes narrowing slightly. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Pull everything you can on Crystal Gold Jewelers," Troy replied, tossing his keys on the desk. "I want names, employee rosters, customer, complaints, security footage if we can get it." Lorna blinked. "That's a bit specific. You taking on a new case?" He nodded, loosening his tie. "I think it might be one that matters more than I expected." "All right," she said, already pulling up a new tab on her laptop. "What am I looking for exactly?" "Anything on a Mr. Andrew Lim. And a woman named Mary Quinto. She might be listed as a customer or acquaintance." Lorna's fingers danced across the keyboard. "Got it." While she worked, Troy sat in his chair and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. His mind wasn't on the office anymore. It was still in that cold visitation room, with a woman whose name triggered something deep and forgotten. He rubbed the back of his neck and muttered, "Come on, just give me something." 2 hours later, Lorna returned with a folder full of printouts and screenshots. "Okay," she said, dropping the file in front of him. "Lim's the owner and manager. Been running Crystal Gold for over 15 years. Real control freak, apparently. Multiple employee turnover in the past 5 years. Quiet settlements and 2 wrongful termination cases. Both female staff." Troy's eyes narrowed. "What about Mary Quinto?" "She's not on the payroll, but get this. Security footage from a nearby shop shows her entering Crystal Gold the same day Aylin was arrested. And no other customers followed. The timestamp overlaps with the store's recorded theft window." She slid a printed image across the desk. A grainy still of a woman in designer sunglasses walking into Crystal Gold. Troy stared at the photo. "That's her?" "Yep, that's Mary. And guess what else? She has a couple of flagged records from other counties, shoplifting, petty theft, always slipped through on lack of evidence or withdrawn complaints." Troy's jaw clenched. "I also found photos from Andrew Lim's Facebook account. Not exactly smart about privacy. Here." She handed over a few more printouts. Each showed Lim and Mary together, arm in arm at a party, seated close at a restaurant. "Smiling on a vacation." "His mistress," Troy muttered. Clearly, it was all coming together. A pattern of abuse, negligence, and power. Lim had thrown Aylin under the bus to protect someone else. Someone he didn't want exposed. Troy stood, heart pounding. He didn't just want to win this case anymore. He wanted to bury Andrew Lim. "Lorna," he said firmly, "call my investigator. I want witness statements from anyone who worked there the past 5 years. And start drafting a legal motion. If he tampered with evidence, we'll need to escalate." "You got it," she replied, already moving. As she left, Troy opened his drawer and pulled out his old notebook, the one he used to journal in before the accident. Maybe, he thought, it would help him piece together more of his past. But for now, his mind was fixed on Aylin. She had suffered quietly, lost her job, nearly lost her freedom. And yet, she was still composed, still kind. Now Troy had something she never did, power, and he would use every bit of it to make things right. He picked up the phone and dialed the precinct. "This is Attorney Troy Sanders. I'm calling to post bail for Aylin." "Fletcher." On the other end of the line, a clerk responded in surprise. "That's great to hear, sir. We'll have her processed in the next 2 hours. Let me know the moment she's released," Troy instructed. "Yes, sir." When he hung up, he stared at the folder on his desk. Justice wasn't a straight, but he had walked darker paths, And now he was ready to walk this one, all the way to the end, because this wasn't just about law, it was about memory, it was about redemption, and maybe it was about love. The next morning, Troy stood outside the polished glass doors of Crystal Gold Jewelers, the documents and photos burning a hole through the folder under his arm. He walked in like he owned the place. Andrew Lim was behind the counter, wearing a gold watch that probably cost more than Troy's entire office. He looked up, already frowning. "Can I help you?" Troy placed the folder on the glass and opened it without a word. The first photo showed Lim and Mary Quinto holding hands at a resort. The second was a security cam image, Mary walking into the shop alone the morning of the theft. The third was a record of Mary's prior shoplifting charges. "What is this?" Lim growled. "Evidence," Troy said coldly, "and leverage." Lim tried to scoff, but Troy leaned forward, voice low. "You framed Aylin Fletcher to protect your mistress, and now I'm here to make things right." Lim's eyes darted to the entrance. "Lower your voice. No, you're going to listen, and then you're going to act." Troy outlined his demands clearly. A public apology posted to all Crystal Gold social media platforms. Full reimbursement of Aylin's back wages. Repayment for the bail and legal fees. "And if I don't?" Lim asked, lips curled. Troy didn't flinch. "Then your wife receives this folder. So does the press, and so does the state bar, with a request for an investigation into obstruction of justice." Lim's face lost its color. "You can walk away with your secrets bruised but intact. Or you can go down with the woman you tried to protect. Either way, I'll clear Aylin's name." For a long moment, silence hung in the air. Then Lim sighed, defeated. "Fine, you'll get what you want. Do it now," Troy said. Within the hour, the apology went live. The payment was processed, and Aylin Fletcher's name was officially cleared. But the confrontation didn't end with business. Troy lingered a moment longer in Lim's office, watching the man squirm under pressure. "You thought nobody would care what happened to a single mother. You thought she was expendable," Lim said nothing, avoiding eye contact. Troy pressed on. "That boy, her son, walked 10 kilometers just to find help. You think this is about money or reputation? No. This is about the kind of man I refuse to let win." He turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. "And just so you know, I already sent a copy of those photos to your wife. Consider this your early retirement notice." The door clicked shut behind him, and Lim slumped into his chair like a deflated balloon. Outside, Troy stood still for a moment, breathing in the cold morning air. It tasted like justice. As he walked back to his car, the weight in his chest lifted ever so slightly. He glanced down at the manila envelope holding the receipts and apology printout. This wasn't just paperwork. It was a key to something, long locked away. Later that evening, Troy arrived at Aylin's small home. She opened the door with cautious eyes, but the moment she saw what he held, she blinked in disbelief. "You did it?" she asked. Troy nodded. "Your name is clean, your job record restored, and your wages are here." She took the envelope slowly, as if it might vanish if she moved too fast. He saw her eyes glisten, but she quickly turned away, clearing her throat. "I don't even know how to thank you." "You don't have to. Just let your son know he was the bravest person I've met in years." Aylin smiled softly. "I will." Before he left, she asked, "Why are you doing all this?" Troy paused. "Because I think I knew you once. Because every time I see your son, I feel something I don't understand. Because I owe you more than I know." But instead he said simply, "Because someone has to." As he walked away, he didn't look back, but her voice followed him, quiet, sincere. "Thank you, Mr. Sanders, for everything." In that moment, he didn't need to remember the past to feel like he was walking toward something important. He just knew, and that was enough, for now. It had been a few days since Troy last saw Aylin. He'd been buried in casework, but the thought of her, of the boy, Priam, kept surfacing in his mind. There was something about her that lingered in the background of his thoughts like a song. he couldn't quite place. So that morning, with the envelope of her back pay in hand, Troy drove back to the modest house at the edge of town. The lawn was small but neatly kept, and the porch had a gentle, lived-in feel. Aylin was outside watering the potted plants that hung from the eaves. Her head turned slightly when she heard the car pull up. "Troy," she said, wiping her hands, on her apron. "Good morning," he greeted with a light smile, holding up the envelope. "I finally got a break in court. Thought I'd deliver this in person." She walked down the steps to meet him at the gate. Her expression was polite, maybe even grateful, but guarded. "You didn't have to make the trip," she said softly, taking the envelope. "I wanted to," Troy replied. "And this way I know it got to you safely." She nodded and murmured a quiet thank you, but her eyes stayed fixed on the papers in her hand. Troy tilted his head. "You know, I'm still looking for a secretary at the firm," he said casually. "And with your experience, you'd fit right in. Pay's decent, hours are flexible, you'd be near Priam." Aylin looked up for a split second, then glanced away again. "That's generous," she said, her tone careful. "But I've already submitted applications elsewhere." Troy studied her. "You're not even curious about the job?" she offered, a faint smile. "It's not about the job, I just think it might be better if I worked somewhere else." That answer hit like a dull thud in Troy's chest. "Better how?" Aylin didn't respond right away. She looked past him, eyes unfocused, as though trying to search for the right lie to tell. Troy stepped forward, voice quieter now. "You know you've been avoiding eye contact since the day we met." She blinked. "That's not true." "It is. And I'm not saying that to push you, Aylin. I'm just trying to understand. When we met, something shifted in me. Not just sympathy or concern. Something deeper, familiar." Aylin's hands tightened around the envelope. "Sometimes people just remind us of others." "I don't think that's what this is," Troy said. "When I first saw Priam, I felt like I'd seen him before, like something inside me recognized him before my brain could catch up." She was silent. The only sound was the wind brushing the hanging pots. "I'm sorry," Troy continued. "I don't mean to make things harder for you. I just want to be honest. Ever since I woke up from that accident 7 years ago, I've felt like there's a piece of me missing. And being back here, meeting you and your son, it's like that missing piece is getting louder." Aylin looked away. "I'm sorry about your accident," Troy nodded. "Me too. I just wish I knew what I lost." Aylin's voice was barely above a whisper. "Some things stay buried for a reason." "But why does it feel like you know what I lost?" he asked gently. She froze. Troy didn't press her. Instead, he gave her a soft look and stepped back. "Well, the offer still stands. If you ever need anything, job-related or not, you know where to find me." She gave a small nod. As Troy turned to leave, Aylin's voice stopped him. "You were different before." He turned slowly. Before the accident," she said. "You smiled more. You were impulsive but kind and a little reckless." His breath caught. "Did we know each other?" Aylin didn't answer. She just stepped back into the house, closing the door softly. Behind her, and Troy stood there, heart pounding, certain of only one thing. She was hiding something. And whatever it was, it had everything to do with the years he lost. Troy couldn't sleep. Aylin's final words from earlier echoed in his mind. "You were different before." The way she said it, not as a compliment or a memory fondly recalled, but as a truth heavy with weight, had cracked something inside him. He sat in his home office that night, lights dimmed, a half-empty glass of bourbon untouched by his elbow. The soft tick of the wall clock seemed louder than usual. In the shadows, time itself felt heavy. He opened the old notebook he used to jot down thoughts after his accident. It was a patchwork of fragmented dreams, partial faces, street names, song lyrics that felt oddly familiar, but none of it had led him anywhere until now. There was something about Aylin's presence that both stirred and soothed him. It wasn't just familiarity. It was gravity. And Priam, the boy. He hadn't stopped thinking about him. the boy's mannerisms, the gentle but fearless way he spoke, even his eyes. Troy had seen those eyes somewhere, and if he was being honest with himself, he knew exactly where. In the mirror. The next morning, Troy drove back to Aylin's house. He hadn't called or texted. He wasn't even sure what he was going to say. All he knew was that he couldn't keep circling the truth anymore. She opened the door, slightly startled to see him. "Troy, can we talk?" he asked. "Just 5 minutes." Aylin hesitated, then nodded and stepped aside. The house was quiet. Priam was already at school. They sat in the small living room. He noticed the same photo frames turned face down on a nearby shelf. Troy folded his hands. "I need to tell you something. About me." She didn't interrupt. He took a breath. 7 years ago, I was hit by a truck in Seattle. I was in a coma for a month. When I woke up, I thought I was 22. Aylin blinked. Her body tense. The doctors called it selective amnesia. I lost about 3 years of memory. Not everything, but the most important years, apparently. Her throat moved as she swallowed. "Ever since then, I've had this dream," he continued, voice softer now. "I see a woman. She has this warm smile. I tell her I love her. She says she loves me back, but her face is always blurred." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "But when I saw you, when I saw your son, I stopped dreaming. It was like the dream had walked into real life." Aylin stood up and turned away, gripping the back of the chair. "I'm not trying to force you into anything," Troy added quickly. "I just need the truth, because every second I spend around you two, it feels like I'm standing in the life I forgot." Silence. He stood too, gently placing a hand on the chair beside her. "Aylin, did we know each other before the accident?" She turned halfway toward him. Her eyes were glassy, her expression unreadable. "Why does it matter?" she asked quietly. Troy's voice cracked. "Because if I lost you, if I lost him and didn't even know it, I can't live with myself." Her eyes welled up, but she shook her head. "You have a girlfriend, a life." "No," he said, firm. "I have a life that started after a blank page. Whatever came before, it haunts me. And if you're part of that, I deserve to know." Aylin sat back down, her shoulders collapsing inward. "It hurts," she whispered, "seeing you again." Troy said nothing, just waited. Finally, she looked at him. "There was a time when you used to say we were unbreakable, that no matter what happened, we'd find our way back." His breath hitched. "So why didn't you?" she asked, almost angrily now. "Why didn't you come back?" He shook his head. "I wanted to, I just didn't know." Her lips trembled. "Then maybe it's better you never remember. Maybe some wounds are better left closed." Troy stepped back, understanding but devastated. "If you ever change your mind," he said softly, "I'll be waiting." As he turned to leave, he heard her whisper, barely audible, "I never stopped loving you," and the door closed. Troy didn't know what he expected when he showed up again the next morning. Maybe a slammed door, maybe silence. But Aylin opened it slowly, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness, and stepped aside without a word. They sat at the same spot on the small couch, sunlight slanting through the curtains like a spotlight over years of silence. Troy waited. She didn't look at him. Instead, she looked at her hands as they fidgeted in her lap. "I owe you the truth," Aylin said quietly. His heart thudded once in response. "I wasn't trying to hurt you, Troy. When I saw you again, when Pry brought you here, I didn't know how to process it. I thought I'd buried all of it deep enough to survive." He leaned forward. "Aylin, what were we?" She gave a bitter smile. "Everything." And then she began to speak. Not in a rush, but in slow, trembling waves. "You were in law school. I was working 2 jobs. We met at the university. You were that guy who played guitar on the benches and made every girl laugh. I wasn't impressed. At first." Troy let out a short laugh, a memory flickering faintly. "But you didn't give up," she said. "Eventually I let you in. We fell in love. Deep, young, messy kind of love. We talked about getting married, about moving to Seattle together. But then my mom got sick, tumor in the brain. I couldn't leave her. Troy nodded, his throat tight. You went to Seattle alone, Aylin continued. You said you'd visit your parents, tell them about us, tell them I was pregnant. You left with a promise to come back in a week. She looked up now, straight, into his eyes. But you never came back. Troy's breath caught. I waited, she said. 1 week, then 2, then a month. I called, texted, emailed, nothing. At first I thought you'd changed your mind, that you'd left us. But that didn't feel like you. I couldn't believe that. She paused, voice wavering. So I went to Seattle. I tried looking for you, but all I had was your parents' last address and a phone number that never rang again. I didn't even know what hospital you were in. Troy felt like someone had hollowed out his chest. My mom died shortly after, Aylin said, eyes welling up. It was just me and the baby, Priam. She said the name like a lifeline. I named him after the last king of Troy, remember? You always joked that if we had a boy, that would be the name. He did remember. It struck like lightning, faint but real. A shadow of a smile shared between two people on a rainy bench. I was 6 months pregnant when I realized I'd never see you again. I tried to hate you. I failed, she whispered. I just kept going for him. Troy's vision blurred. His jaw trembled. He's mine, he said, voice cracking. Aylin nodded. Yes. He leaned back, stunned, his breath shaky. Oh my God, I had a son. All this time. You did, Aylin replied. And he's wonderful. He's kind and curious and brave, and everything you'd want in a child. Troy buried his face in his hands. I missed everything. His birth, his first steps, first words. You didn't choose to, she said, softer now. I see that. He looked up. Why didn't you tell me when we met? I didn't know if it was really you. You looked at me like a stranger. And I was scared. Scared it would hurt more if I let you in again and you left again. But I'm here now. I know, she whispered. They sat in silence, broken only by the wind tapping the windows. Troy finally said, Does he know? Aylin shook her head. I never told him about you, just that his dad wasn't around. Troy wiped his eyes. I want to be. If he'll let me. If you'll let me. Aylin looked down at her lap again. It's not about letting. It's about trusting time. He adores you already even without knowing. But this time, Troy, if you're staying, stay. I will, he said without hesitation. She nodded. Then we'll tell him. Together. Troy couldn't sleep that night. After Aylin's confession, his world tilted on its axis, and now, everything. The boy's eyes, his quiet bravery, his name, clicked into place. There wasn't a doubt in his heart, but the mind demanded proof. Not for reassurance, for closure. The next morning, Troy called a clinic he trusted in town and scheduled a paternity test. When he picked up Priam from school, the boy bounded into the car, his usual cheerful self. Where are we going, Mr. Troy? He asked, munching on a banana. Somewhere important, Troy said gently. We're going to check something out together. Nothing scary, I promise. The clinic was clean and quiet. The receptionist smiled at the boy and handed over some paperwork. A nurse came in moments later and explained everything to Priam in simple, calm language. The boy nodded bravely, squeezing Troy's hand when they took a quick swab from the inside of his cheek. That's it? He asked afterward. That was easy. You were amazing, Troy said, ruffling his hair. Back in the car, Priam leaned his head against the window. Mr. Troy, do you think my dad will ever want to meet me? The question was like a blow to Troy's chest. He cleared his throat. I think if your dad knew how incredible you are, he'd want to be with you every day. Priam smiled faintly. Mom always said good people come back to the ones they love. It took 3 days for the results to come in. 3 days of pacing, rereading old case files, and trying to distract himself with work. But on the morning of the 3rd day, the clinic called. The envelope was heavy in his hand. Not physically, but emotionally. He sat in his office, the morning sun casting long shadows, and opened it. Our 9% match. There it was. Cold, clinical, undeniable. Truth. Priam was his son. Troy stared at the paper, but all he could see was the boy's smile, his laugh, the way he tilted his head when curious, just like Troy did when he was a kid. He drove straight to Aylin's house. She was outside again, sweeping the porch. She looked up and saw the expression on his face. Wordlessly, she stepped aside and let him in. "I got the results," he said quietly. Her shoulders tensed. "And?" 99.9%, he whispered. Aylin sat down slowly, her face unreadable. "I never doubted it." "Neither did I," Troy said. "But now it's real. It's official. I have a son." Aylin looked up at him, her eyes softer. "What are you going to do?" Troy didn't hesitate. "Whatever it takes. I want him to know who I am, not just as Mr. Troy, as his father." She took a long breath. "Then we'll tell him tonight, together." That evening, the three of them sat around the small kitchen table. A plate of cookies sat untouched. Priam swung his legs under the table, glancing between the adults. "Sweetheart," Aylin began gently, "we want to tell you something important." The boy's eyes widened. Troy cleared his throat. "You asked me the other day if your dad ever wanted to meet you." Priam nodded slowly. "Well, he does. Very much. He always did. He just didn't know where to find you." Silence. Then a blink. "Wait. What do you mean?" Troy leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. I'm your dad." For a moment, the boy didn't speak, just stared. Then his eyes welled up with tears. "You are?" Troy nodded, his own throat tightening. "I didn't know. I had an accident years ago. I lost some of my memories, but now I know. I remember. And I want to be your father, if you'll let me." Priam stood up, walked over slowly, and wrapped his arms tightly around Troy's waist. "I knew it," he said, sobbing softly. "I just knew." Troy knelt and held him close, tears running freely down his cheeks. "I'm so sorry I missed so much. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Behind them, Aylin wiped her eyes, smiling through her tears. Later that night, after Priam had fallen asleep on the couch, still clinging to Troy's hand, Aylin brought him a blanket. "You made him so happy tonight," she whispered. "I think he made me even happier," Troy replied. They stood quietly watching the sleeping boy. "He's brave," Troy added. "Like his mother. And stubborn," Aylin said with a chuckle. "Like his father." They laughed quietly. Then silence. Again. "We'll take it one step at a time," Aylin said. Troy nodded. "One step, but I'm not missing another one." The following days were a quiet symphony of rediscovery. Troy began visiting more often, usually in the evenings after work. At first he brought simple things, books for Priam, some groceries, fresh flowers for the table. But what he was truly bringing without realizing was the gentle rhythm of a man returning home. The first dinner they shared as something more than acquaintances was unassuming. Chicken stew, steamed rice, and the clatter of spoons on mismatched plates. But beneath the surface, something sacred stirred. Priam chattered excitedly about school, occasionally pausing to grin up at Troy with awe. "Did you know I'm the fastest runner in my class?" Priam boasted one evening. "No way," Troy grinned. "You? The same kid who took 10 minutes to cross the Kya lawn yesterday?" "That was strategy," Priam said, dead serious. "I was saving energy." Aylin laughed, a warm, unguarded sound that took Troy's breath away. It had been years since he'd heard that sound, though he hadn't realized how much he missed it until now. After dinner, they'd sit on the porch. Priam would curl up with a comic book, while Troy and Aylin shared stories about their days. Sometimes they sat in silence, but it was a full, peaceful silence, like the kind you only share with someone who once knew your heartbeat. One Saturday afternoon, Troy showed up with an old guitar slung over his shoulder. "I remember this," he said, holding it up. "It was in my parents' attic. I used to play back in college." Aylin's eyes softened. You used to play for me. Every Thursday, in front of the library. He sat on the porch steps and began strumming a few uncertain chords. Priam was instantly captivated. Play. More, the boy said. Only if you promise to clap even if I mess up, Troy replied. Deal. He played. It was rusty, and his fingers stumbled now and then, but the music drifted through the air like a forgotten lullaby. Aylin watched him, 1,000 memories flickering behind her eyes. That old feeling stirred again. Not just nostalgia, but something more dangerous. Hope. She had told herself not to fall. She had insisted they remain friends for Priam's sake, for her own sanity. But Troy, this Troy who brought bananas, who cooked pancakes on Sundays, who danced in the kitchen just to make their son laugh. He was breaking down her walls without trying. He was still impulsive, still stubborn. But now he was also grounded, kind, and carrying the weight of what he had lost like a man who refused to squander what he had regained. One night, while tucking Priam in, Troy whispered, "You know, I never stopped dreaming about you. I just didn't." "No, it was you." Priam blinked up at him. "Did you dream I was this cool?" Troy chuckled. "Even cooler." In the hallway, Aylin overheard. Her heart twisted. The tenderness between father and son grew naturally. Homework turned into storytelling. Bedtime became a ritual of shared jokes and whispered promises. Troy was careful not to overstep, always checking with Aylin, always asking what felt okay. And Aylin, in turn, found herself wanting to say yes more often. One evening, after a community fair where Troy had proudly walked around with Priam on his shoulders, Aylin pulled him aside. "You know, he's not just happier, he's stronger." "You brought that." Troy shook his head. He already had that in him, he just needed someone to remind him. "You remind me too," she said softly. Their eyes locked. For a second too long. But she pulled back, cleared her throat. "We're still taking it slow." "Of course," Troy said. But they both knew. The family they had once dreamed of was no longer a dream. It was rebuilding itself, moment by quiet moment. It was a lazy Sunday morning, the kind where the world seemed to pause and let people breathe. Aylin was cooking breakfast while Priam danced around the small kitchen humming a tune Troy had taught him. The door was open, letting in sunlight and birdsong. There was laughter, warmth, the illusion of normalcy. Then a shadow crossed the doorway. "Troy?" The voice froze Aylin in place. Standing just outside the gate was a tall woman in a navy coat, her expression unreadable, her dark eyes scanning the cozy scene inside. "Fatima," Troy said from the hallway, his voice hoarse. Aylin turned slowly, pancake spatula still in hand. Her eyes darted from Fatima to Troy, then back again. Her posture straightened, the laughter gone. Fatima stepped inside. Her gaze flicked toward Aylin and Priam. "I didn't know you had company." Aylin took a step back. "Hi, I'm Aylin." Fatima extended her hand. Fatima, Troy's girlfriend. The silence that followed was heavy and immediate. Aylin stared at Troy, her features stony, her eyes narrowing. Troy stepped forward, as if to intercept the tension. "Fatima, maybe we should talk outside. I think I deserve to know what's going on." Fatima replied calmly, but her tone carried steel. Priam, sensing the tension, looked at Aylin. "Mom, why don't you go read your comics in the room, sweetheart?" she said gently. The boy hesitated but obeyed. As soon as he disappeared, Aylin turned to Troy. "You never told her?" Troy opened his mouth, but no words came. He looked stricken. Fatima crossed her arms. "Tell me what? That you have a child, that you've been playing house here while I've been waiting in Seattle?" "It wasn't like that," Troy said, his voice strained. "I didn't plan any of this. But it happened," Aylin said sharply, hurt creeping into her voice. "You told me you wanted to rebuild things. Start slow. What was this then? Just a visit? A detour?" "No," Troy snapped, louder than he meant to. He ran a hand through his hair, eyes. "Build? I didn't mean for any of this to be hidden. I was trying to figure it all out. I didn't even know Priam was mine until days ago." Fatima flinched. "And me? Was I just a placeholder until your memory came back?" That's not fair, Troy said. You know I cared about you. I still do. But I was lost. My mind, my memories, everything felt incomplete. Then I came back here and found the missing piece, Aylin finished for him. Her voice was low, measured. But you should have told her. The moment you knew. Troy swallowed hard. I know. I messed up. Fatima's expression softened for just a moment. So what now, Troy? Am I supposed to just walk away? Pretend this didn't happen? Aylin's eyes dropped. She turned toward the stove and shut off the burner. You don't have to pretend, she said quietly. But you deserve the truth, Fatima. Troy and I, we had a past, a deep one. We were going to get married, but then he vanished. I thought he left me. Turns out he had an accident and lost his memory. Fatima blinked, visibly shaken. He never told me that either. Troy exhaled. Because I didn't know how. I kept dreaming of a woman, a life I couldn't reach. I tried to move on. With you. But the second I saw Aylin again, everything started falling into place. Fatima nodded slowly. You love her. Troy didn't answer right away. But his silence said enough. And you love that boy, she added, her voice breaking slightly. He finally looked her in the eye. More than I can explain. Fatima wiped a tear away before it could fall. You should have told me, that's all I wanted. I'm sorry, he said, truly meaning it. She turned to Aylin. Take care of him. He's a good man, confused but good. I will, Aylin said softly. Without another word, Fatima walked out. Troy watched her go, his chest aching. He hated hurting her, but for once he had clarity. He turned to Aylin, who was staring out the window, her jaw clenched. You didn't deserve that, he said. She shook her head. I'm not angry she came. I'm angry you let me believe you were free. Troy stepped closer. I thought I was. Emotionally, I was with you. I just didn't end it the right way. That's not how relationships work, Troy. I know, and I'm sorry. She looked at him, eyes glassy. You need to figure out what you want. Not for me. Not even for Priam. For you. I already have. She didn't say anything. He reached for her, and let me prove it. One day at a time. Aylin looked down at their hands, then she nodded once, but the pain still lingered. The door closed behind Fatima with a soft click, but the echo it left in Troy's chest was thunderous. He stood in the hallway for a long moment, his fingers still curled as if trying to hold on to something intangible. Silence hung thick around him. He knew he couldn't run anymore. He found her sitting on the front porch swing, the one they used to share during quiet evenings in Seattle. The cushion still had the same old tear on the right side. Fatima didn't look at him. Her hands rested on her lap, clasped tightly. Fatima, Troy began, his voice low. I thought you loved me, she said calmly. I did, I do. But, she turned to him, her eyes sharp. But not the way you love her, Troy swallowed. I didn't remember, Fat. I swear to you, if I had known, if I had even a hint, you don't need to explain. She cut him off, not unkindly. I saw your face, Troy. When she spoke, when you looked at her, you remembered something the moment. You saw her, didn't you? He nodded slowly. I spent months wondering why I always felt like a chapter in someone else's story, she said. Now I get it. Your heart was always looking for home. You were good to me, Troy said earnestly. I never meant to use you or hurt you. Fatima gave a soft, almost bitter laugh. You didn't use me. You tried. You wanted to move on, and so did I. But love doesn't work like law. You can't rewrite it just because the case is messy. He sat beside her, careful to keep a respectful distance. If things had been different, but they're not, she interrupted. They are exactly as they are, and that's okay. I'm not mad at you. I'm sad, but not mad. They both stared at the garden. A child rode past on a bike, laughter trailing in the air. He's beautiful, Fatima said softly. Priam. I could tell right away. You two have the same way of tilting your heads when you're thinking. Troy smiled faintly. He's brave, like his mom. You're going to be a good dad, she said, finally looking him in the eye. I want to be. Then start by being honest. Be all in. Don't second-guess this. He nodded. I won't. Not again. Fatima stood, brushing off her coat. I'll book a flight back to Seattle tomorrow. I just need tonight to sort things out. Troy stood with her. Do you want me to drive you? I think it's best you stay here. With them. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. It's a picture from when we went to the coast last spring. You looked happy that day. I want you to remember that it wasn't all fake. He took it gently. It wasn't. Not 1 second. Fatima gave a small, sad smile. But now you get to be with the woman your heart never stopped dreaming about. Go. Live. The life you forgot. She walked away without another word. Troy stood there until she turned the corner, gone. He exhaled deeply. The weight of confusion lifted, replaced now by clarity and responsibility. He had hurt someone good, but he had also been given a second chance at something irreplaceable. That night, as he returned to Aylin's home, the stars above Georgia looked brighter. He walked inside and found her and Priam asleep on the couch. The boy curled against his mother. He didn't wake them. He just sat beside them, watching over the family he had lost, and now found again. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the rhythm of their breath, Troy knew exactly what he had to do next. It was dusk when Troy pulled up in front of Aylin's modest home. The sky burned orange and lavender, casting long shadows across the quiet street. He sat in his car for a moment, gripping the bouquet of white lilies and baby's breath he had picked up from the local flower shop. His palms were sweaty. Okay, he whispered to himself, exhaling slowly. One day at a time. He stepped out, closed the car door gently, and walked up the short path to the house. The porch light flickered on just as he raised his hand to knock. Before he could, the door opened. Aylin stood there, surprised. She looked tired, her hair pulled into a loose bun, a smudge of flour on her cheek. Troy? Hi, he said, lifting the bouquet slightly. These are for you. She looked at the flowers, hesitated, then slowly took them. They're beautiful. He smiled sheepishly. I wasn't sure what you liked. I just went with what felt right. Aylin stepped aside. You want to come in? If it's okay. She nodded. Priam's asleep. He had a long day at school. Troy entered quietly, the familiar scent of home-cooked food still lingering in the air. She placed the bouquet in a vase on the kitchen counter. They sat down at the small table, silence hanging between them like a curtain. I wanted to talk to you, Troy began, about a lot of things, but mostly about the dreams. Aylin looked up. Dreams? He nodded. Ever since the accident, I kept seeing a woman in my dreams. Her face was never clear, but her voice, I knew her voice. Every time she told me she loved me. Every time I told her I loved her back. And then I'd wake up, aching. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to hold her gaze. I thought it was all in my head. I thought maybe it was just my brain trying to fill in the blanks, but when I saw you, when I heard your voice, it clicked. You were the woman in the dream, Aylin. You always were. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The intensity in his eyes made her chest tighten. I know I messed things up, Troy continued. I should have told Fatima everything sooner. I should have been honest with both of you. But I was scared. Scared that if I remembered everything, I'd lose the life I'd been trying to build. Aylin looked down at the table. And now, he leaned in slightly. Now I know none of that life was real without you in it. She didn't respond. Her fingers traced the rim of her coffee mug. I'm not asking you to forget what happened, or to forgive me overnight, Troy said. But I'm asking for a chance to start over from the beginning. Let me prove that I mean every word. Aylin raised her eyes slowly. You don't even remember who you were back then. How do you know you still love me? Troy exhaled. Because even when my mind forgot, my heart didn't. That connection I felt the moment I met Priam, that wasn't just coincidence. It was blood. It was something deeper. And with you, every second since we met again, every shared meal, every glance, every word, it all felt, right. Familiar. Like I was finally home. Aylin bit her lip, blinking back tears. Do you know how many nights I cried? Wondering where. You were? Wondering what I did wrong? I thought you left me, Troy. I thought you stopped loving me. He reached across the table and gently took her hand. I never stopped. I just got lost. And now that I've found my way back, I want to stay. The room was still. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. You want to start over? She whispered. He nodded. Whatever pace you're comfortable with. I don't need grand gestures, just let me be here, let me earn it. She stared at him for a long moment as if trying to read between his words. Finally, she gave a small nod. Okay, one day at a time. Troy's shoulders sagged with relief. A faint smile curved his lips. And Troy? She added softly. Yeah? Next time you bring flowers, don't bring lilies. They're funeral flowers. His eyes widened. Oh God, seriously? She laughed for the first time in days. Seriously, Troy chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Duly noted. Roses next time? Tulips, she said. I like tulips. He grinned. Tulips it is. That night, as he stepped out into the cool air, Troy felt lighter. The road ahead wasn't easy, but it was real. And for the first time in years, he wasn't walking it alone. The next morning arrived with a crisp blue sky and the scent of early blossoms in the air. Troy stood outside Aylin's house again, his heart pounding like he was a teenager about to ask someone out for the first time. This time, he wasn't holding flowers. He was holding intention. He rang the doorbell, shifting his weight from foot to foot. The door creaked open, and there she was, hair still damp from a morning shower, wearing a loose shirt and faded jeans. She looked soft, real. You're early, she said, eyes crinkling just a little. I couldn't sleep, Troy admitted. Aylin stepped aside, letting him in. Inside, Priam was sitting cross-legged on the couch, coloring a picture of a rocket ship. Dad, he called, waving. Troy's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't gotten used to the word yet, but every time he heard it, it rooted deeper in his soul. Hey, champ, we're going to the park, right? Troy looked at Aylin, asking silently. She nodded. Yep, and I brought snacks. Hope you still like peanut butter sandwiches. Aylin gave him a sly look. Only if they're not too soggy. They walked together to the nearby park, a modest green space with swings, monkey bars, and a sandbox that had seen better days. But to Priam, it was a kingdom. He ran ahead, laughter trailing behind him like wind chimes in a breeze. Troy and Aylin followed more slowly. The air between them felt new, not tense, but cautious, like something fragile, forming. He's amazing, Troy said, watching Pry climb up a slide. He's been through more than most adults. But he keeps smiling. Troy glanced sideways at her. I wonder where he got that from. Aylin didn't answer, just tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. They sat on a bench, their shoulders barely touching. When he was younger, he asked me every day where his dad was. I didn't know how to answer. I just said, he was someone brave who loved him very much but couldn't be here yet. Troy swallowed. I hate that you had to go through that. That he did. We survived. That's what matters. And now? She turned to him. Now we try. Carefully. Slowly. Priam deserves that. He nodded, deeply moved. I want to be here for every part of his life. Parent-teacher meetings, scraped knees, science fairs. All of it. And what about me? She asked, not as a challenge, but as a quiet truth. Troy looked at her, truly looked. I want to earn you back. I want to know the woman you've become, not just remember who you were. Aylin's lips curled into a soft smile. That's a good answer. The rest of the day unfolded in small moments. Swing pushes, shared jokes. A picnic under the shade of a tree. Priam fell asleep with his head on Troy's lap, and Aylin watched the two of them, the lines of old pain softening around her eyes. There were still shadows, but now there were smiles too, one day at a time. The morning was quiet, sunlight casting golden streaks through Aylin's kitchen window as she packed Priam's lunch. Troy sat at the table, sipping coffee, eyes following her every move like he was memorizing her all over again. "You ready?" she asked, zipping up Priam's backpack and placing it by the door. He nodded, swallowing the last of his drink. "Yeah, nervous but ready." "Don't be," she said gently. "You asked me to take you to where we started. I will. But only if you promise me one thing." Troy raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Promise me you won't push yourself too hard. If it gets painful, we stop." He smiled softly. "Deal." After dropping Priam off at school, Aylin drove them toward the university campus where their story had begun. The road was familiar, yet blurry in Troy's mind. As they approached the main gate, something inside him stirred. "Here," Aylin said, parking under a large acacia tree. "You used to wait for me here, guitar in hand. You played Can't Help Falling in Love once. It became our song." He stepped out, the air thick with nostalgia he couldn't yet grasp. They walked slowly through the grounds, students passing them, laughter and music in the distance. "I can't remember the song," Troy muttered. "You will," Aylin replied with a sad smile. They reached the courtyard with its familiar stone benches. She gestured to one of them. "That's where I used to sit with my friends. You were over there." Troy looked at the spot, his temples beginning to throb. He pressed his fingers to his forehead. Aylin reached out quickly. "We don't have to keep going." "No," he said firmly. "I need to." Their next stop was a small cafe just outside campus. "You insisted we only eat here during finals week," Aylin recalled. "Said it brought you luck." Troy chuckled weakly. "Sounds like something I'd say." Inside, the bell above the door jingled. The same elderly woman behind the counter smiled at them. "Well, if it isn't Lovebirds from the old days," she teased. "I remember you too. He played guitar. You cried once during finals, and he bought every dessert on the shelf to cheer." "You up?" Troy blinked, his chest tightening. "You remember that?" "Clear as day," she said. Back in the car, Aylin hesitated. "There's one more place. You don't have to go if it's too much." "Take me," he said. The plaza was mostly empty when they arrived. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the ground. A small church stood silently across the square. Aylin walked slowly. "We had our first kiss here, our first fight, our biggest dreams." Troy nodded silently. The pain in his head returned, sharper this time. He stumbled. "Troy!" she cried, catching him. "Let's stop. No, wait." He sat on the edge of a fountain, holding his head. Then, as if a dam broke, memories came rushing in. The laughter, the fights, the joy, the proposal. A rainy night. Him on one knee, a straw ring in his fingers. "We don't need money to promise forever," Troy gasped, eyes wide. "I remember." Aylin froze. He turned to her, tears brimming. "You..." Stood there crying. "I was soaking wet. I gave you a straw ring." She nodded slowly, lips trembling. "Yes, and I said yes." He pulled her into a tight embrace, burying his face into her shoulder. "I'm sorry it took so long. I remember everything now. The music, the promise, the love." Aylin clung to him just as tightly. "Welcome back, Troy." As the sun dipped, below the horizon, the past and present finally merged. The boy with a guitar and the girl with tearful eyes were still here. Older, scarred, but whole again. And from that moment on, Troy knew he hadn't just regained his memory. He had found his heart again. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting golden light across the plaza where it had all started. Troy's palms were sweaty again, just like the day he brought flowers to Aylin's door. But this time, he held something much smaller and far more significant, a small velvet box tucked securely in his jacket pocket. He had planned it carefully. Priam was with his grandparents, who were more than happy to babysit for the evening. Troy had made a dinner reservation at Aylin's favorite restaurant, the one she mentioned offhand once during their long talks. But somehow, halfway through, dessert, Troy had asked if they could go for a walk instead. She agreed without question, sensing something behind his nervous smile. They wandered the cobblestone paths in the fading light, surrounded by laughter and the soft bustle of evening. Goers. Street vendors called out cheerfully, music drifted from a nearby cafe, and the scent of roasted chestnuts filled the air. Aylin stopped in her tracks as they neared the church. Her eyes widened. "This place," Troy nodded, gently taking her hand. "I remember everything now." She turned to him, stunned. "Everything? The night I proposed to you here when I didn't have a ring. I made one out of the straw from our drinks. You laughed so hard, but you still said yes." Aylin covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes shining with tears. Troy stepped closer. "I've been thinking about this moment every single day since I got my memories back. And even before that, when I didn't understand why you were always in my dreams. It was always leading to this. To us." He reached into his jacket pocket, heart pounding in his chest, and dropped to one knee. The small crowd nearby noticed. A couple of teenagers gasped and pulled out their phones. A street musician slowed his song. The entire plaza seemed to hold its breath. "Aylin Fletcher," Troy said, voice trembling but steady. "I promised you something once with nothing more than a straw and a broken dream. But now I have more than that. I have our son, I have our memories, I have my heart whole again, and I want to give all of it to you. Will you marry me?" Aylin's breath caught in her throat. The ring sparkled in the golden light, delicate and perfect, but it wasn't the diamond that made her cry. It was his eyes, full of sincerity, full of everything she thought she'd lost. "Yes," she whispered, nodding through tears. "Yes, Troy." The crowd erupted in cheers. Strangers clapped and whistled. The street musician picked up his guitar again, strumming a romantic tune. A woman nearby threw a handful of confetti from her shopping bag, laughing through happy tears of her own. Troy slid the ring onto Aylin's finger, then stood to wrap his arms around her. He kissed her deeply, not caring who was watching. It was the kiss of 7 years lost and found again. A kiss that spoke of pain and healing, of promises renewed. When they pulled apart, Aylin leaned into him, laughing between sniffles. "I can't believe people were filming this. Let them film. Let the world see what real love looks like." Later that night, as they scrolled through social media, they discovered someone had already posted the entire proposal. It was spreading quickly, shared, liked, and commented on by thousands. "This feels surreal," Aylin said, curled up on the couch with Troy. She stared at the video of herself crying as she said yes. Troy kissed the top of her head. "Surreal or not, it's real. You, me, and Pry. That's all I've ever wanted." The moment had gone viral, but for Troy and Aylin, it wasn't about the likes or the shares. It was about finding their way back to each other in a world that had nearly torn them apart. And this time, they were holding on for good. Troy and Aylin's story didn't end with a kiss or a ring. In many ways, that was just the beginning. After their emotional reunion and heartfelt proposal, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Aylin and Pry moved into Troy's modest but cozy home. It wasn't perfect, but it was filled with warmth, laughter, and the sound of something they hadn't dared to dream of for years. Family. Priam, ever the curious and kind-hearted child, thrived with both parents in his life. He began to call Troy Dad without hesitation, each syllable a balm to the wounds of time lost. The bond between them deepened through school drop-offs, bedtime stories, weekend picnics, and whispered promises before sleep. For Troy, every second was sacred. Every shared smile with his son felt like a miracle retrieved from the ashes of forgotten memories. Aylin, too, began to let go. She let her walls crumble, one by one, as she rediscovered the man she once loved, and found that he was still very much the same. Only now he carried more pain, more humility, and more resolve. They took things slow, respecting the time it took to heal old scars. But day by day, the weight of the past gave way to the joy of a second chance. A year later, their small family, Drew, Aylin gave birth to a baby girl they named Prim, a symbol of spring, of first blooms of hope reborn. Priam, proud and protective, adored his baby sister. He held her tiny hand with awe, as though promising her all the safety the world had once denied him. When Troy's parents came down to visit from Seattle and met their grandchildren for the first time, the emotions were overwhelming. His mother cried. His father hugged Aylin and whispered, "Thank you for waiting." There were no grand confrontations, no need for explanations, just the quiet understanding that love, when it lasts, needs no defense. Their home, once marked by shadows, now echoed with joy. There were the inevitable challenges, tantrums, long workdays, sleepless nights, but also a kind of peace neither Troy nor Aylin had ever known before. They cooked together, danced in the kitchen, and built routines out of small rituals. Sunday morning pancakes, rainy day movie marathons, and nightly prayers whispered over two children who had brought them back to each other. Troy often sat by the porch at dusk, watching the sun dip low, holding Prim in his arms and listening to Pry chatter about his day. Sometimes Aylin would sit beside him, their shoulders touching, saying nothing. Because in those moments, nothing needed to be said. They had found their way back, against all odds. Their story was one of pain. Yes, of time lost, and memories stolen. But more than that, it was a story of love that refused to die, of forgiveness, of rediscovery, of the kind of family that's forged through storms and still stands tall. And yet, even as peace settled around them like a blanket, something stirred beneath the surface, a faint whisper of the unknown. Because fate, as they both had come to learn, had a cruel sense of timing, and fate's not done with them yet. Stay tuned for the next chapter.